Hey friends, welcome to the Life on Life podcast. I'm Punky Tolson, and this is the place where everyday life and biblical truth come together, and you and I get to walk it out together. Hey there, guys. Welcome back to Life on Life. Today, we're going to talk about distractions. Why? Because we're distracted. Because we are distracted people living in a world full of distractions. And those distractions are devised by the devil to disable Christians, to throw us off balance, and to keep us from standing firm in our faith. So what is a distraction? Quite simply, it's anything that pulls our focus, that pulls our attention away from something and on to something else. Primarily, it captivates our mind and pulls us in a direction away from that most important thing and gets us fixated on something that is less than. And so we all know how dangerous distractions can be behind the wheel of a car. In fact, in 2019, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration reported that distracted driving was a reported factor in 8.5% of all fatal motor vehicle accidents that year. That's a big number, you guys. So what does that have to do with us spiritually as Christians? Well, if you and I want to stand firm in our faith, we've got to get our mind focused and free of distractions so that we can maintain that spiritual fervor and focus that God intended for us to live with. So how do we do that? We've got to get our head in the game. We've got to get our head in God's game. What does that mean? It means don't let the world around you pull your focus from why you're here and from what you're headed for, what you're destined for. You see, it's no surprise that Satan, who is the one dominating, the one ruling this world's system, works to keep Christians focused in the world and on all of the things, all of the happenings, all of the current events, the troubles and the terrors going on out there, and all of the must-haves, the must-do, must-buy, must-be, must-see, must-do all of these things. And then there's social media that is this machine that drives our FOMO, our fear of missing out, to the point that we can't even see straight. And y'all, we can't see straight because we're not thinking straight and we're not thinking clearly, to the point that we lose sight of our goal and our purpose as Christians, as Christ's followers, and why we're here as God's chosen people on this planet. So our heads aren't even in God's game because they're wrapped all around the distractions and the cares of this world. And the distractions out there, y'all, they are telling us what to think instead of how to go about thinking the right way, thinking rightly, so that you can keep your mind focused on the right things and on the truth. So, y'all, if you want to stand firm in your faith, you've got to get your mind focused and free of distractions so you can maintain your spiritual focus and fervor. So how do we do that? Well, Peter tells us that in 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 13. He tells us you've got to prepare your mind for actions. He says this, therefore, preparing your minds for action and being sober-minded, set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. He starts that out with therefore. And when you see therefore, you always ask, what's the therefore? So prior to that, what Peter has laid out to these Christians that he's writing to is a lot of encouragement and who they are in Christ and what God has promised them. He is writing to Christians, as he says, God's chosen people, undergoing persecution as new believers. This is after Jesus' ascension into heaven. And he's encouraging them because they're undergoing so much persecution and they've been scattered because of this persecution all over the Middle East and parts of Asia. And Peter wrote to them and gave them some big encouragement to keep on living well for Jesus, to live for God in the midst of their suffering, to live as overcomers, as Paul says in Romans 8, in a world that was and still is hostile to followers of Jesus Christ to this day. So chaos and the persecution around them was causing them to lose focus. It was pulling their spiritual focus. And so Peter wanted to recalibrate them under truth. And so he reminded them. He kept calling back to mind again and again and again these things to get their heads on straight by remembering who they were and whose they are. And that is so important for you and me today. Remember who you are and whose you are. He reminded them how much they belonged to God, that he had chosen them, that they belonged to God and they were secure in the grip of God. He reminded them how to live their lives by trusting the Lord and by following in obedience no matter what was going on around them, because they were divinely protected by God. And then he said, keep your hope fully in what is to come. He reminded them to keep their sights on the heavenly horizon, on what was to come. Primarily what he was referring to there was the return of Jesus, which we know was not happening right then in the moment, and it hasn't happened yet, but it will happen. Jesus will return, and the promise of God's ultimate redemption is his imminent return. And that is something you and I can't forget, and it is something that you and I have to keep living for and keep our minds focused on. So why is this important for us today? Well, just turn on the news, y'all. I mean, flip open your phone and look at social media. I mean, we're bombarded with it all day long. There is more and more chaos in the world that is so confusing and so distracting and so frightening. It's calling us to compromise truth, y'all. It's calling us to tolerate immorality, to cower in fear, to back up and to shut up or else. That's what's going on out there. That's the kind of turmoil we're living in right now that is keeping us off balance as Christians. And so the way to navigate that is exactly what Peter did with these Christians. He told them to prepare their minds for action. So we have got to do that, prepare our minds for action, get our head in the game with our hope fully fixed on what is coming, the return of Jesus, so that you and I can do what God has given us to do right now until he does return. So where is your head right now? Is your head in the game? Is your mind prepared for action? A surefire way to determine where your head's at is to listen to where your mouth is at. What are you talking about? Seriously, y'all, what are you talking about? Ask yourself that question. What am I talking about? Then listen to yourself over the next day. Just listen to what comes out of your mouth. What we talk about reveals what we think about most. What we talk about reveals what we think about most. The Bible tells us out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. The heart is the mind, will, and emotions. It's not just pumping blood through our bodies. Biblically speaking, the heart is the mind, will, and emotions of a person. So what we hear and what we see, what we take in with our eyes, what we take in with our ears, impacts our thinking. So you might say that we think with our ears and our eyes. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Isn't that what Jesus said is the greatest commandment? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. So there's this mental aspect to loving God. The mind is powerful. The mind is often referred to as a spiritual battleground. That's where the enemy likes to come in and wreak havoc. That's where the war is waged, between our ears. It's very much a mind game, and Satan knows that. See, the mind is impressionable. The mind is moldable like plastic. In fact, you might have heard this term before, neuroplasticity. It's a term that is way beyond my intelligence, but it means the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout life, especially in response to learning new information or through an experience or following some kind of an injury. So it's saying we can create new thought patterns, new ways of thinking by exposing them to new learning and new information or experiences, or as it says, from some injury. But what Peter is saying here, prepare your minds for action. He's saying be intentional with how you're thinking. Be intentional with what you're thinking. Get your mind thinking in the right direction and get your head in the game, in God's game. So the mind then is often referred to, as I said, that spiritual battleground. So we've got to get mentally prepared. We've got to get our mind ready for action because it is a battle out there. And the war is waged in our mind, so it can only be fought and won as we are prepared mentally for it. So how do we prepare? How do we do that? By being sober-minded, Peter says. preparing your minds for action and being sober-minded, set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. So sober-minded, let's talk about that for a minute. It means to be alert, clear, sharp in our thinking, clear-headed. Fully sober means to not be intoxicated by the world. Biblically, what we're saying here, fully sober, sober-minded means to be not intoxicated by the world. I'm not talking about alcohol here, but that is also something we need to pay attention to. It means not to be intoxicated by the world. Intoxicated means ignorant, brainless. It means, in this regard, unholy thinking. Intoxicated means unholy thinking. When we're intoxicated, we're not thinking straight. When we're distracted by the world, we're pulled away, and the compromise of the culture causes us to live for the moment in the live for the moment culture, the political culture, the woke culture, the whatever culture it is. Then when we get involved in that, we get intoxicated with all of that, we are doomed to fall into that worldly intoxication like a drunk that has been overserved alcohol, and we will fall flat on our faces in the face of any kind of trouble or adversity or persecution. So here's the ticket. As God's chosen people, we are holy. That's what we are. Say that. You're holy. I'm holy. Just tell yourself right now, I'm holy. That doesn't mean you're religious. That doesn't mean I'm religious. Holy, biblically speaking, means to be set apart for God's purpose, for his intentional, his plan from all along for you to live holy, to live according to his purpose. So that means that if we are holy people, we have got to live holy, to live set apart or different, refreshingly different from what the world around us is living like, to stand out from the rest of the world in every way, every aspect that we live. So set apart in our mind, set apart. Ask yourself, or what will you allow, or what are you allowing to meditate on, to continually fixate on, and to run around in your mind over and over and over again. The things you read, the things you watch, the things you listen to, all impact your thinking. Are they causing you to think holy, to think rightly, to think biblically about things? Set apart your mouth, the way in which you speak, the things you talk about and the things you don't talk about. Set apart in your eyes and in your ears. Think about the TV and the movies that you watch. What are they doing to you? The music that you listen to, what's it doing to you? Think about how that's having an impact on you. Set apart your attitude, set apart your motivations. What are you living for? What are you motivated to work for, earn a living for? Whatever you do, what are your passions geared towards? Set apart your passions to be holy, your motivations, your attitude. Cultivate holy living. It's not going to happen overnight, but we've got to start cultivating holy living. Think differently, think holy, and you'll live holy. So let's do a little bit of a personal holiness assessment. What do you talk about? What do you text about? What do you tweet about most? Go back and look at some of your posts. Go back and look at comments you've made on other people's posts. Look at the things you've written, the things you've texted to other people. What are you communicating about? What are you talking about the most? If your thought life is out of control, chances are your mouth is going to be out of control too. So another question, who or what are you listening to? Who do you follow on social media? Who's influencing you? What kind of examples are those people that you're following? What are they known for? A blue check mark is something that social media gives. It's a designation that people get after they have a certain number of followers that designates them as an influencer. I guess somebody that has that many followers, people will pay attention to because they think, oh, they have something to say and everybody else thinks it's worthwhile, so I must listen to that too or pay attention to that. And so there's all kinds of advertising things linked to that too. But the point that I really want to make is that a blue check mark next to someone's name or handle is not an indication of reliable truth or integrity. Think about the influences those people with the blue check marks are having on your life. Ask yourself, am I starting to think like them? Am I starting to sound like them? Am I starting to adopt their beliefs? Do I have conversations where their names are brought up all of the time? So what kind of an influence are these influencers having on your life and on your holiness? Are they impacting you for holiness? Or are they impacting you to be intoxicated by the ways of the world? There's a song that your kids have probably sung, or maybe you sang it as a child growing up. Be careful, little eyes, what you see. Be careful, little ears, what you hear. You know, little kids repeat what they hear and what they see. And sometimes parents are taken aback and a little embarrassed by that, but they are going to repeat things. But y'all, big kids do the same thing too. We will repeat what we see. We will repeat what we hear. So be careful. Be careful. In John's epistle, John, the gospel writer, his third epistle, 3 John 11 says this: follow only what is good. That word good means what is beneficial, what is helpful, what is beautiful in helping you to become like Jesus. So follow what is good. Follow people who fill your ears and fill your mind with things that are good things that motivate you toward holiness. Are the influences on your mind having a positive and holy effect on your living? Ask yourself that, and then do an assessment. Go through do some social media house cleaning, and maybe you need to do some friend house cleaning too. I think we've mentioned that a time or two on the podcast. So we are either going to be thinking holy and living holy, or we are going to be thinking and living like an intoxicated fool. So which one are we? We are either pursuing Jesus and holiness, or we are pursuing the world and all of its intoxications and distractions. So what's the answer? What's the answer for us? It's get your mind right. It's prepare your mind for action. Get your mind right. Fix or fasten your thoughts on Jesus, and you'll keep your mind ready for action. You probably know this passage in Hebrews chapter 12. I'll read it to you, verses 1 and 2. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside or throw off every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set out before us, looking to Jesus. Some translations say, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Gosh, I just love that passage of scripture so much. So our problem is that we tend to think that we are living as though we are living right now in the land of the living, on our way to the land of the dying. And it's the exact opposite. This world is fading away. This world is passing away. This world will one day be destroyed. And Jesus, as he was living on this planet, and as he was going to the cross for us, being nailed to that cross and hung there dying for us, what kept him going, his motivation, was you and me. It says, for the joy set before him. We were that joy set before him. He had his eyes on an eternal horizon, on a heavenly horizon, where one day you and I would be joined together with him. And so he was focused on you and me, and for his joy, it gave him great joy in the midst of being nailed to that cross, that he set his sights on us. And similarly, we set our sights on him. We set our sights on his return. We persevere during persecution on this planet. And none of us have known persecution like the early church knew persecution. But persecution is coming in some way, shape, and form. And it's heating up daily. So we've got to prepare our mind for action because it's coming. And what's going to help us stand firm in the midst of that is keeping our eyes set on Jesus and fixed on that heavenly horizon when he is one day returning, and he will. That's a certain hope that Peter talks about here in 1 Peter, that certain hope, that living hope that is to come. And that hope has a name, and his name is Jesus. And so again, if you and I want to stand firm in our faith, we have got to be prepared in our minds for action. Prepare your minds for action. Get your mind focused and free of distractions so you can live holy, live purposefully with your hope full and set on the return of Jesus. So don't let the world around you pull your focus from why you're here and what you're headed for and what you're living for right now. Keep your head in the right game, the eternal game. Begin with the end in mind. Begin with that finish line, that heavenly finish line in line, and look to that finish. Look to Jesus and live your life with that end in mind. I love you guys. That's that for that. And I'll see you next week. And don't you forget that you are greatly and dearly loved by that King, King Jesus, who is coming back again. See you next week.